I thank you, all of you that had the interest and courage to stay to the end of this conference. And therefore, I'm sure that you expect me to, focus or share with you some of my observations. You have heard so many lectures and presentations, speeches, whatever you call them. And also, you have also challenged some of the speakers. There are questions, and also there are some questions were answered, some are not answered very well. Just before I share my observations with you, let me make a comment about this earlier presentation about cinematography. Many years ago, I was advisor to some producers who were making Hollywood movies. And in all these, my contribution to them was to see if they have covered or they understood the nuances, cultural nuances of the scene that they were just wanted to shoot, and the film that or the scriptwriter actually did a good job in understanding or reflecting the cultural, values, cultural nuances in the film. In one of these films, maybe you have seen it, it was Horseman. Omar Sharif was playing in that Horseman. They tolerated for a while my advice and my comments, and then they became impatient with me. And they said, look, sir, we are not making a documentary. We are not making a history of somebody or somewhere. We are making a film to sell, to market. So you have to take this always in mind. And the documentaries are different, and movies that Hollywood or Bollywoods are producing are looking for the market. You can criticize it, you can critique it, but that's the way it is. Now, back to the, in the past 2 days and a half actually, the words which often mentioned were three: democracy, peace, culture. And more than any other, words that you heard here. But always these words were interconnected. Some were, in some presentation or speeches, there was an effort to interconnect them, and some actually was just spoke and discussed about them in a separate of others. Now, with the question of regard with the democracy, I think there was a major discussion on the first day, and also some challenges. Now, one thing that we always ignore is democracy is a process. It is not a template. It changes over time. I think Kofi Annan once said very well. Kofi Annan, he was the Secretary General of the United Nations. He said that there are as many forms of democracy as there are so many democratic countries. So it is. However, there are certain principles, certain tenets that you have to. The democracy is a government of people. The sovereignty does not go from top to bottom. The sovereignty starts from the lowest level of the society. That's where the vote comes. There was some discussion about vote, who has the eligible to vote and who isn't. But vote is universal. This is a right of every individual. Maybe over time the situation changes in certain countries and some areas that I covered. For example, in Central Asia. I was writing about Central Asia from 1993 to 2000 about the democratic changes in the post-Soviet Central Asian republics. I was based in Almaty, and I was traveling around in different stands. And in one of the demonstrations in Kazakhstan, I remember it was 1995. There was a major demonstration of people who were retired and others, and they were challenging the government, Nursultan Nazarbayev, that we were better off under the Soviet Union. He said everything was predictable. We had our salary, and we know that what were the prices, and we go, and so why we have to now accept something that we don't know, and it does not provide us with what we need. And I asked one person that said, look, do you think that your children are thinking the same way? He said, I don't think. Maybe 10 years, 12 years, they will be better off. But I will not be alive at that time. What I need is, what I want is what I need now. For 6 months, I have not gotten my salary. And when I get my salary, they pay me in kind. Maybe 100 lots of soap or chips or something like this, or 10 copies of machinery parts. What can I do with that? And I have seen myself that in those streets of Almaty, streets of Kyrgyzstan, Bishkek, people were selling these parts because that was part of their salary. They paid them in kind. So now, if you cannot see everything, democracy had to be built. You know, and you have read the Declaration of Independence of the United States. 56 people were very brave people who did that. They knew that by writing this declaration, maybe they would be labeled as traitor by the British government and be executed. Yes, but they sacrificed that. Out of 56 people, 9 of them or 5 of them were captured. They were tortured as traitors until they died. 9 of them was removed and their homes were destroyed, razed to the ground. 5 of them were killed in the War of Independence. Many of them lost their sons in the War of Independence. People who were wealthy, they actually lost their property, their ships, because of the war. Because sacrifice needs for democracy. You can build democracy to sacrifice them. And that's when I remember that when James Madison, one of the authors of the Declaration of Independence, came out, and a lady asked him, "Sir, what kind of a government is good for the United States? For the America," he said. Madison said, "Republic, madam, republic, only if you can keep it." So democracy is not something that you establish that will stay there. You have to nurture it. At the beginning of you look at the history of the United States. In the beginning, who could vote? Whites and Protestant, and those who had land property, landowners. But over time, you see it changes. And the Constitution of the United States now have 27 amendments. And today, it's what it looks like. The same way in other countries, I think it is something that is you have to be patient with democracy. We have to be to sacrifice for it. You have to have the intention. Otherwise, you have trappings of democracy. You have it everywhere. You look around. Many countries call them democratic countries, democracy, but they are not. They are trapping of democracy. Not. So therefore, I think what Max Weber very well said that it is the democracy can come when you have when the authority is, he called it rational legal authority. Rational legal authority is this: when people agree on some rules, and these rules, the government or the authority can implement them by institutions that they can have the effectiveness to implement these rules. And that's what the democracy can become. That's what Max Weber said. And even in the Islamic political theory, if you say, the government or the legitimacy of a government is built on two pillars. One is justice, the other one is security. Justice means rule of law, all equal in the society before the law. And security is not just physical security, it's a human security. Human security means that freedom from fear, freedom from want. And now, with one caveat, that you are free from fear now and free from want, but you are also assured that what you have today, tomorrow will be the same, can be predictable. So when you take all these things, you can find the meaning of democracy and the essence of democracy. And no matter how you put it in practice, how you execute it, what institution you built, then that democracy comes. So therefore, I take issue with those who think that some countries, some people are not ready to vote or ready to democracy. Everybody is democratic, but it is an evolution. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes also the sacrifice. Now, the other word that we use most of is peace. Peace is just an empty word. You know, I remember many years that I was reading Quincy Wright's book on. He wrote that book in 1943 during the Second World War, and he study of war. He says that book is study of war. Very good book. He said proximity is actually one of the motivation or motives or drivers either of cooperation or conflict. He said if you have dependency in proximity, particularly cultural dependence proximity, you can always stay in peace. He gave the example of Canada and the United States. And then if you have no dependency and no cultural affinities, proximity means the beginning of war, conflict. Today, the world has changed. Today, dependency means different thing. Dependency has a wider meaning, a wider, prospect. And that dependency is the reason that you do not see that kind of competition that reached war in 1970s, 1870s, or 1914s, or 1939 in Europe. Today you have competition. You have the great power competition. But that dependency actually, global dependency actually, is one reason that actually support peace. And culture was also mentioned. Culture is part of that. Culture diplomacy is an instrument of power in any countries, and it actually facilitates other objectives. As we heard today, that how the soft power or cultural, engagements can impact other national objectives, whether it is political, whether it's economic, and others. Now, today, in the competition, in the great power competition, I'll just to conclude. Today, in the great power competition, the competition areas are almost the same as it was during the Cold War. Competition, 4 areas. Competition to form or to get allies, to gain allies, to attract allies, to make allies. Competition to get or gain bases, political, military, and economic basis. Third is competition for material, sources of material. You can see today that the competition for the chips that is going on. And then finally competition for ideology, competition for ideas, competition for whose idea is good, whose ideas are. That was very prominent during the Cold War. And today, it has changed, the context has changed, but still the ideas are there. So today when we talk about peace, about democracy, about conflict, they're all related to one another. I'm very, very happy that the presenters, the speakers, actually took time to discuss all of these issues in their presentations. I'm very happy also, and appreciate Mark for putting together an agenda which was full, is interesting, comprehensive, and diversified. So therefore, I'm sure that you have learned much from the speakers, and appreciate your presence here, particularly for this last session of this conference. Thank you very much.
Professor Jalali, you definitely exceeded our expectations, and that was a great way of bringing together a lot of loose ends. As you said, many questions were posed. Some were answered well, some less well, some weren't answered. So it's great to try to weave that together. And I'd like to give you the chance to ask Professor Jalali anything you'd like about his speech now. As you know, he's a man of tremendous experience, also other topics. We'll start here in the middle. Esteban's bringing a microphone.
Okay. Hello, sir. Thank you very much. I guess I would like to ask a question about the process of democratic development. Actually, I think within this sessions we had in the last couple of days, it was touched before, especially when His Excellency Ambassador of Pakistan was here. And he was talking about democracy as a good tool, but as a tool which could be also a little bit flawed in some certain examples. And I was thinking about that for some time. I read how, for example, democracy was installed in France, kind of similar way that it was in the US through the revolution, and then there was a certain group of people who didn't enjoy any votes writing for a long time. Women didn't get the votes for a long time. But steadily, piece by piece, this, overall rule got... everyone got to enjoy it. So I would ask this question for you as well, because we have a couple of countries around the world which got independent not that long time ago. For example, if we talk about Pakistan, got independent in 1947, and other countries around that time. But the concept of democracy was already formed in, at least the way how we see it now, that everyone can vote, that we have parties, party has a leader, so we elect them. So when those countries got independent, many of them decided to pick this way to develop themselves. And automatically they gave the rights of voting for everyone. But historically we see that, the democracy has developed a bit differently. So do you think it was the right thing to do, to give everyone the right to vote? Or should the country pursue a more meritocratic way and then build their own democratic institutions throughout some time that would allow everyone to vote and this vote to be actually efficient? Thank you.
Thank you. This is a very interesting question. First of all, I should say that election is not democracy. Election should be in democracy. Democracy is based on elections, but election is not democracy. You can have elections, but not democracy. Because democracy is developed when you have a vibe in a very active civil society, a middle class we have. In a country, they have institutions that they control. When you have the freedom of assembly, freedom of speech. We have the political parties and others. Then you have the voting means something. In Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, I observed the elections. The vote was not, cast by individuals, but a group of people who represented it. It was like a mixture of direct democracy and representative democracy, because those people who were in the tribal areas or in the kind of rural areas, they trusted their leader, so that the leader would tell them, okay, vote like this. In some cases, even we detected in Kazakhstan that people were taking the ballots of hundreds of people. One person will come and put it in the box, because he was the representative of that. It's a mixture of direct democracy. But when you have a representative democracy, you should have the institutions too. In Afghanistan, I tried very hard when I was Minister of Interior. And I was telling everybody inside Afghanistan and also in Europe and also in Washington, that if you invest, if you want democracy, you have to invest in institutions, not individuals who are fighting against terrorism. If you do not invest in institutions and invest in individuals, institution will be weak. An individual influence the institutions. The day will come that the institution will be not able to deliver what we want to, like particularly the judicial sector, and the individual will not be interested in what democracy. They're interested in their own wealth, their own power, their own influence. And in Pakistan, I think the problem with the democracy was always the clash, I wouldn't not say clash, but a kind of a confrontation between the civilian democratic government and the army. Pakistan actually, from the beginning, security was India-oriented. How to protect itself from India. And the instrument of power in that situation was the army, in the nuclear weapon later on, and the non-state institutions that were working for that. And that was something that that actually undermined some tenets of democracy. You see, half of the time of the life of the Pakistan, during half of the time, it was the government was, but the military government came after the coups. Today also, you read in the media that there's a tension in Pakistan between the army and the elected government. They remove a prime minister and help a prime minister. So it is the army. The other day, when I think a student asked the ambassador that, are you representing the civilian government or the army government? Because they are two, center of authority in Pakistan. So yes, that's a problem of Pakistan. In any countries, things can change, can develop over time. But two things are necessary. One is the intention and patience to build democracy. Second is sacrifice. Some people should sacrifice. Not to undermine democratic process for their own group or personal interest or influence. That happened in many countries, including in Afghanistan. Thank you.